everyone, and welcome once again to Kathy's Corner. I'm Barbara Tien with Project Kin, and it is my pleasure to welcome once again Kathy Stone, who I always think of as the cornerstone here at Project Kin for her ongoing series, Kathy's Corner. We use these episodes each month to really dive into one of the core things so many of us share in our family history work is the collection of materials we have received from our ancestors, from our parents, grandparents, aunt, uncle, somebody in the family. And so often photos, documents, materials are part of that. Kathy helps us understand what's there, how to work with it, how to preserve and protect it, as well as how to make the most and understand what's happening with all of these materials. And today she has a very special topic that comes up quite a bit when you discover that other cousin has something really useful. So over to you, Kathy. Tell us more.
Okay. So a long, long time ago, we talked about calling me, I think when we began Kathy's Corner, as being your Sherpa over Mount Inertia, which was our metaphor, analogy for that conquering that big pile of photos that we inherit and photos and stories and memorabilia and how to get through it. And so that's what we've been doing for, I guess, a couple of years now. I'm going to let me, because I need to see people's faces. I got to get you off there. Now you're on the main screen so I can see you, who I'm talking to. So conquering Mount Inertia. So that was one of the sort of our metaphor. We kind of went away from it for a while, but I thought this is a good time to bring it back because we've spent the last few months talking about how to date photos or how to identify who's in them. And we're kind of at a point now where there's things pop up that aren't really part of the 8 steps. But so I called them boulders and scree. And I don't know, I'll explain what scree is for those of you who don't know. You can Google it too and find out. But in the mountains, particularly near where I am, scree is loose rocks. And so if you're mountain climbing, you can either come across big boulders you have to climb over, or just a bunch of loose rocks that you have to be very careful with on your footing and making sure that you don't slip in the scree because it can be quite dangerous. So it's a little Rocky Mountain term that we use here. So we're going to talk about. I called this part one, so maybe we'll continue with more if we get some more issues and things coming up. In the next day or so, you're going to see a survey from me. As Barbara goes, I thought you were doing that today. No, I'm not quite. I'm going to have a survey out in the next couple of days, and the survey is going to be about what is preventing you, what boulders are in your way, stopping you from either digitizing your photos, gathering them, identifying them, what kind of things are hindering you to get a better idea of how we can help you with that going forward in Kathy's Corner. So that should be out tomorrow. Fairly sure it'll be out by tomorrow. You can tell I just remembered I was supposed to do that. Am I covering well? So that's what you'll see coming. But so we'll probably have a series now on dealing with these little things that crop up in when we're trying to follow those steps, or also where we're having trouble following the steps and how we can move forward, because it is a lot of work, and it can sometimes be so overwhelming. And we'll get part of it done. I had posted something in Kathy's coaching, a little note about an article that a scanning company actually surveyed some of their customers and discovered that only 24% said they had completely digitized everything. And then a lot of people have some digitized, and then people have not digitized at all. And so I thought, well, let's talk more about the people who've started. And quite a few of you commented on that post and said, I'm partly done. I haven't got it all done. So I thought, let's see what we can come up with down the road that will help us move on with that. And I'm in the same position. I'm packing up a ton of more negatives to send off to scanning. I think I'm in the 70s now. I'm going backwards. So, and then at some point, pretty soon I'm going to run out of negatives, so I won't have to do more negatives. But it's tough to keep going. So we're going to try and look at the little boulders and things that may hinder us or be an obstacle in our path, and try and figure out how we can get past that. And so we launch into copyright. And this is where I said, if you need a nap, you might have one here. I've been looking at copyright in kind of in detail for the last 3 days, 4 days now, and my mind hurts. It's a very, very complex um, area of discussion. First, disclaimers, because we're talking about legal things. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a photo organizer. I do not have a legal background, even though a long time ago I wanted to be a lawyer when I grew up. I never ever became a lawyer. So this isn't legal advice. This isn't interpretations of law. This is guidance coming to me from a photo manager of how we can navigate copyright with our own photos or photos that we uncover in our collection. The first thing, copyright law. I would love to put a slide up and say these are the rules that you have to follow and go, okay, we're done. We can move on to our more fun topic about gathering stories. But unfortunately, it's not like that. Copyright is not black and white. It's very open to interpretation, and it often changes and evolves. So it's something that you have to keep up to date on, keep looking at, and to try and figure out um, what's happening in there. So, and I loved. So Barbara's going to put in the chat for Mission Genealogy. Deborah Carl did a post 2 weeks ago now, and one of her tips in Mission Genealogy, which I thought was brilliant, on copyright. And this is what kind of triggered me to talk about copyright in Kathy's Corner in regard to photos, because a big gray area. Deborah's quote at the beginning of her article, I absolutely loved, so I'm going to quote it again for you. She says, I have to resist using images that don't technically belong to me because of copyright issues. But at the same time, I ask myself, is anyone going to care? And I think that's a very good, valid point about copyright. And as we go through this, we'll talk a bit more about when somebody might care and when probably nobody will care. And a lot of it's going to depend on what you're doing with photos. So I popped up 3 photos here. And this is partly where we get confused about what copyright is. So the old photo there, which I think I showed you recently, because it's one of my newest discoveries, and it got scanned recently, so I could easily find it. We think those 3 kids are my grandmother and her 2 siblings. There is, if you can see at the bottom, there is on the beige part at the bottom, there is some kind of a photo mark. I haven't quite got my high-tech glasses, magnifying glasses out yet to study it in detail and enlarge it and see if I can read it. It's tough to read. It's very faded. To see if I can identify the photographer. Why would that help me any? We're not really sure, because my grandmother was born in when was Grammy born? In the 1800s, late 1800s. So that's a really old picture. Chances are that guy's not around anymore to give me permission to use this photo. uh, the other photo, the other one that's kind of color but sort of brown, because it was taken in that time where all the photos are looking brown. I haven't edited yet. Um, there's photos in my collection. I have a whole bunch of others I took that day, but I didn't take it because I'm in it. So you can figure out I'm the one in the white hat with a maple leaf on it. I thought that was appropriate too. So I know who took the photo. One of my boyfriend at the time took the photo of us skiing with my little cousin and his friend, who we took out cross country skiing. I know a lot about the photo, but because a question, who owns that photo? Me, because it was taken with my camera, it's in my possession, or, as we're going to find out later, the guy who took the picture. And then the picture, I just have to throw this nice one in there, but this is a picture that I took. This is out my back window in my yard, what I look at every day. And I've posted it on social media, and I'm thinking, if I do say so myself, that's a pretty nice picture that I took. Um, could someone steal my picture and use it? Because it is my photo, so I have the copyright on there. Okay. Yep, we're working good with the system here. So here's some basics. What is copyright? It is the legal right of the creator of an original work. It can be a song, a photo, music, a story, a book, a video. The legal right of the creator has the right to use, copy, share, or publish the work. owning the work itself doesn't mean you own the copyright. So even though that picture of my grandparents or my grandmother and my great uncles and aunt is in my possession, and I came by it, well, I guess reasonably it came from my mother because it fell out of one of her scrapbooks the other day when I found it. I still don't own the copyright just because I have the picture. Everything is copyrighted, even if it doesn't have the copyright mark on it. Any work is, so if you can't say, oh well, there's no C with a circle around it, must not be copyrighted. No, it doesn't work that way. Everything is copyrighted. The creator, unless they specifically sold it or granted copyright to someone else, owns the work. End of period. No ifs. This is one part that is clear. There's no ifs, ands, or buts as to who is the original copyright holder. After that, we get into a lot of gray areas. The law, what does the law say? We would have hoped that this would give us clear guidance. It doesn't. First of all, laws vary by country, which I found out. And in the resources to the session, Barbara's going to put, I looked up the copyright laws for the US, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and the UK, because I figured that was where the bulk of our followers are located. So I stopped at that because they're all different, similar, but all somewhat different. And we'll talk a bit later about whose law applies in certain cases. There are a couple international, there's a Berne agreement and a couple other international agreements, but they don't overwrite the law. So that doesn't help us much anyway. And not all countries are, much like many other international agreements we have, not all countries are signatories to them. Some decide they don't want to be anymore, etc. So the law is not black and white. I said that before. There isn't anything clear, and it keeps changing. So there's all evolving. And one of the examples, I think I gave this in one of our Project Kin Live a couple weeks ago when we were talking about Deborah's article, is fair use is a very common term in the US. Everybody talks about, well, it's fair use, it's in fair use. And I looked it up, and Canada doesn't have fair use. We have fair dealing, which is a similar idea, but not the same. And I didn't go and check to all the other countries too, because as I said, I wanted to be a lawyer when I was young, not so much anymore. So reading all the laws, but it's something to check. What is that concept? How does it apply? And the other thing I wanted to mention was orphan works. And what these are, they are works where the creator is unknown or untraceable, which for us in our family photo collections could be a whole bunch of things where we don't know who did this, like the photographer, for example, in that old picture of my grandmother. Pretty sure they're going to be untraceable, even if I can read it. And then we have other pictures. I'll show some more examples later, and we'll talk about that, about how we don't know who took them. Where did they come from? We have no information on them. Using an orphan work is another area where some people will say, well, if I can't figure out who took the picture, therefore I must be able to use it. No. Still, it's risky, even if you can, to use it. And we're going to talk about different uses down the road too, which will help us with our photos. But it still doesn't, the fact that you can't identify who took it or figure out who it belonged to doesn't mean you can go ahead and use it freely. So all the things about use become a question of risk-benefit analysis for our working with things. So, okay. Did I put that picture in twice? I sure did. Maybe I wanted to talk about it more. So here's 3 old photos. The one on the left is my grandparents when they arrived in Canada from on the farm in Islay, Alberta, after landing in Halifax, taking a train to Vermilion, and then arriving there, sitting on the wagon with their worldly possessions, with my aunt and my uncle sitting on there. So nobody else came with them from England. The 4 of them came. So obviously they never took this picture, but it's in my collection. It was passed down to me, but I have no idea who took the picture. And that's one of the first questions in the challenges we face is who took the photo, because whoever took it could still be the copyright owner. So this one, I don't know. I'm going to assume that it could have been they were Hudson Bay settlers. So my guess would be the guy that took them out to the farm from the Hudson's Bay. Our very astute friend Victoria pointed out that if you looked really carefully, I'd shared this in the old Ponga days, you can see the wheels of a car behind the wagon, and that would suggest that someone drove. They possibly drove in a car and someone else drove the horses because my grandfather was a coal miner and I don't think he had any idea how to drive horses. So perhaps they just posed on the wagon once they got there. He learned fast how to drive horses, but he didn't know that. So we don't have no idea who took the picture. Could have been a neighbor. That's fairly unlikely because they were farming in the middle of the prairie. And then the one that we talked about in the middle that I know was taken by a photographer because there's a mark on it, a photographer's mark. And you'll see watermarks, signatures, studio labels on photos and so those are still, they're very clearly were copyrighted photos. The handsome young man in the sailor suit there, and a member of Her Majesty's Royal Navy in England in World War One, is my grandfather. This photo is actually on a postcard. So it was obviously taken when he joined the Navy. Because you could clearly see that the ship and the waves is a background, like especially if you look closely at the photo. Particularly if you look at the bottom, right around where his knees are, and you can see the border edge of where the backdrop is there. So I'm assuming this was some kind of an enlistment photo, but obviously again copyrighted, I would assume, or is it owned by the Navy? Did they have a photographer? Is it the copyright belong to whoever put it on a postcard? Did they have a right to put it on a postcard? We don't know. When was the photo taken can be useful as well because, and again, I will use that word a lot, depending on when a photo was taken, it may or may not be in the public domain now. And what is considered public domain? It depends. Depends on the country and their legal definition of public domain in copyright. Generally, it's said to be anything after, I think the date was 1899, but I haven't found anywhere that confirmed that. And again, it's murky because unpublished photos may not be subject to public domain rules. Like if a photo was never published anywhere, public domain might not even be relevant if it's a family photo. So, or in this case, the photo that was obviously taken by a photographer, if he took the picture and it was taken and given to my great grandmother, that wasn't published anywhere, but yet it remains his copyright. Is your head spinning yet? It also may be if you find photos on the internet, and this is one that I think Deborah addressed this issue too. If you look at photos on the internet and even places like MyHeritage or photos in Ancestry or anywhere else, the copyright on those may be also affected by when the item was digitized. Does it become a new work when someone digitizes and uses it? So if I take my old, say, I know for a fact that my son, who took that picture of the wagon and the horse, and I publish it in a blog, does the copyright on it now remain the 1929 year, or does it now become 2025 when I wrote the blog and included my picture in it? Because that may vary. So you may have a photo that in fact is covered by public domain. Sorry, Hamilton's getting a little louder out there. A photo covered by that appears to be past, so it should be in public domain now. But if you found it in another work that was published later on, the copyright may have shifted to the creator of that work. So again, it depends. I told you, not clear at all. Here's a couple more examples. So the picture on the far left, this is my great grandmother and some of my aunts and uncles. And that's obviously a very old photo. And it very clearly, again, has a photo mark on it. Most cabinet cards, in fact, would fall under this. So that one is probably not probably, it will have originally been covered by the copyright of that photographer. Again, can I find that photographer anymore? I haven't researched that one yet, but I may not bother because we go back to Deborah's comment, who will care? But is it old enough to be in public domain? This would have been taken in England because that's where my family are from. And so I would have to look back at what their rules are about public domain, if that would now fall under public domain. Um, so the picture on the top, I'm going to go with the one in the middle for in a second, but the picture on the top, actually, I don't need to talk about that. It's on the next slide too. So the picture on the top right, that's a picture taken of my grandmother, my aunt and uncle, and and my little baby mother on the farm. Would have been 19, I'm going to guess summer of 32. Mom was born in 31, so I'm betting that's summer of 32. So I have another picture, almost identical, but it's my grandfather with the 3 kids. So I'm going to take a wild guess that Grandpa took that picture. And probably my grandfather is passed. The photos were in the possession of my mother, who's also passed. So I'm going to say that I'm probably relatively safe to use this photo without violating someone's copyright. Pretty sure they didn't hire a professional photographer to come out onto the farm in the dirt there and take photos. The baby in a bucket, you can guess who that might be sitting in the bucket on the table, begging the question of why did they put me in a bucket? But so this picture was sent to me by one of my cousin's daughters, and it was in her dad's stuff, my cousin, and probably was taken by my aunt because my aunt babysat me when I was little enough, apparently by putting me in a bucket. But is that so? Who owns that photo? I don't know who took the photo. When it was taken, it would have been very early on in the 19. I was born in 1960, so I'm going to take a wild guess that was late 1960, maybe 61. I didn't look very big, depending on how big the bucket was. But so I'm probably safe to use that photo too, even though I don't know who took it and I don't know when it was taken. But okay. So this is some other interesting ones. So I had put that picture originally, that's my mother on the far left. I had put that picture originally as another example of what we have, and I don't know if they're all over the world, but here, and I don't even know if they're all over Canada, we had something called street photographers. And they walked around the streets. I've been trying to research them because I find it fascinating. They walked up and down the streets in downtown, and in this case would have been Edmonton, and took pictures of people walking up and down the street. And then you could go to the camera place that they worked out of and buy your picture. They'd all be hanging up on display, and you could buy the picture. And so I looked at that picture of my mom, because obviously it was taken downtown, but in the jewelry store in the back, and I thought, oh, that's a street photo. So I put it on this slide as an example of a street photo. Then I was looking for another photo for another example, and I was in a photo called Uncle Alf, that's my uncle's digitized old negatives. And lo and behold, there was that picture, along with a picture of my mom's best friend who would become my uncle's wife. So I thought, well, those apparently aren't street photos because there's no way that my uncle would have come into possession of the negatives, and he was a photographer. He took all kinds of pictures. He was an amateur. He wasn't a professional. So I thought, well, that's not a good example. So I found you another one. So the other one, this is one of my uncles, and this is clearly, and the only way you have to tell, so the back of the photo has a number on it. And that is a characteristic on all the street photos, because I have a lot. It's just that number 187 was on the back, and somebody bought this photo. So I don't own the copyright. I've tried, I've done a bunch of research, and I can't even find very much out about, other than everybody that lives in this area knows we had these photographers, and everybody's got these pictures, but we can't really pin down as to even the camera store that did them, let alone who the photographers were. So I'm going to guess that that one of Uncle Dick is in about the 50s, I would say. 50s, maybe early 60s. So certainly not public domain yet, but can I use the photo? And I have a new one for you. a new challenge. So here's another one, obviously on a professional photo. And so what I've done in the past, and something you can do, is you can try and investigate the photographer or the photo by the information on the photo. So this is a photo of me. I'm you see the guy with a white coat on in the middle. I'm to his immediate right, taken in the 70s. The person I was dating at the time, his dad owned race horses, and we had gone to the horse races. And I got to be in the picture when the horse won, which was very cool. Not my background to be at horse races, let alone be with the people who own the horses. But so this is a professional picture. They took them. There's two of them, in fact, of two different races that different horses won both races. So I thought, okay. So I flip it over and I find on the back this brilliant logo. Like this is what I say. Sometimes the logos on the backs of photos are as fascinating as the front. So according to this was a photography by Jeff Cody, and it's got a Calgary phone number, a Calgary address. And so I started to look. So I checked first. That guy doesn't have the phone number anymore. That address is a residence. So I Googled photography by Jeff Cody. There's a Jeff Cody, and Cody photographers are very famous and famous in the US for taking photos at horse races like the Kentucky Derby and other ones. They're very well known. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure this isn't the same Jeff Cody, because I really doubt that the dude that was taking pictures at the Kentucky Derby popped into little old Edmonton to take pictures of this little race at Northland Park. Pretty sure that wasn't the case. So now I'm in this confusion of, and the logo for the Cody, which is a massive corporation of people who take horse pictures, is not the same as this horse with the camera. So I'm kind of stuck here. I've tried to release it, or I've tried to research it, and I'm getting nowhere. I could call that phone number, but I've looked up the phone number and it belongs to a different person, and it's a residential phone number. So I'm thinking, no, I'm not gonna, like, the person will think I'm nuts. So I'm not gonna try and phone them and say, hey. And so I can do a little more work I could contact the actual Cody photographers and send them this back and say, um, was this you in the 70s, or did somebody who is taking pictures steal your name and put it on their photos? I don't know. The next question comes out, if I'm going to make this public, the question of model releases, because there's a lot of people in this picture. There's a jockey, the trainer, and most of the people were family, relatives, and of the owner of the horse. But if I want to publish this picture anywhere, technically I need their permission, because I don't own the image, I don't own the rights to it, and I certainly don't own the rights to their images. So it just becomes many more things. So then the question becomes, can I digitize the photo, because it's part of my collection? So I have, in my work, I started working as a photo organizer back in 2012, and a ton has changed since then. But with the first client I had, there were quite a few professional photos in their collection, and my client was, let's just say, in the media business. So I thought, I probably shouldn't just wildly scan copyrighted images in their collection. To find out. So I started checking with things. So in Calgary, we have, they probably do this everywhere. When your kids play sports, whatever it is, hockey, soccer, baseball, every year they take a picture of each kid posing either with the bat or the soccer ball or the hockey stick. And then they take a team photo, and you get the two pictures. You get your kid and the team photo. And so there were a bunch of these in this collection. So, and they're almost here in Calgary, they were almost all taken by the same guy, because it was his business. So I actually called him and I said, this is what I do. And it took a while to explain what a photo organizer did back then, because that many years ago, nobody knew what a photo organizer was. I said, this is what I do. And can I have your permission to make one copy of these pictures? And he said, oh, absolutely. He goes, and I was specifically referring to this client. And he said, absolutely. He said, you go right ahead. He said, any pictures I took, I'm fine with you copying them for a backup. I said, like, I'm backing up their digital files. The family had been through the flood in 2013, and so they became more sensitive about getting digital copies of things. And so, and I said, well, is there any way you could send me like an email saying that I can throw in my files? Sure. So I still have an email from him, from the photographer, saying I can copy. He did give me the copyright. He did not, he gave me permission to a specific permission to archive these photos by making a copy. Didn't say go ahead and print them all up and sell them or anything like that, but he gave me what I needed, and also meant for me that now I can freely digitize all my kids' photos and um, not have to worry about that. The other thing here too is when I started to do this with other photos, was I'd contact the photographer. The bulk of the photographers were like, "Oh wow, I didn't know anyone did that. Absolutely, you can make backup copies. And wow, thanks. Was that ever nice of you to ask? Most people don't even ask." Out of all the people I contacted for this family, and there were quite a few, the only photographer that was said, and there was a couple photos that actually had water damage, and I needed to copy them and edit them, and responded back to me, well, if you can give me the exact date the photos were taken, I may still have my negatives. And there were probably more photos taken that day, so I'd be happy to sell them to you for $350. And it was like, yeah, I think we'll pass, thanks. And we didn't really want to buy more of the photos. We just sort of wanted a backup. Um, so you can do the investigating and figure out, what's what with the copyright. But again, you get a glimpse into the the complexities here. So now what? What do we do? So one of the big questions is intended use. It's not a legal term. It's not in copyright, intended use, but I think it helps us decide um, whether we should use a photo or not. Um, from everything I look at, it seems that in this day and age, archiving for private use seems to be fine. Like if you're digitizing your own photos for your own family, not a problem. And again, I go back to Deborah's comment of who will care. Who will know or who will care, which who will know is not a legal defense, just by the way. The fact you don't get caught doesn't make it all right. But realistically, who's going to come back and say, man, like, so this is a school photo of my cousin who's passed away, and this would have been in the 70s, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he graduated. No, probably the 80s. And it's got the markings on it. It was his grad photo. So what's the intended use? My intended use was to digitize the photos and make him a book. And so that is that okay? So I'm sharing it well, this one wasn't shared online, but if I share it online with family, is that okay? It's not, that might depend too on whether you're sharing in a public forum or a private one too. Am I going to put the photo, am I going to put it in something and publish it in an article or in a blog? Again, what's the intended use? Because I do not own the copyright for this photo. That's the base here. I don't own it. So can I use it in a book or a video montage? I used it, probably not that one because it's got labeling all over it, but I used it in in the video for his service, his memorial service. But we showed that to family. I never ever posted it online. There's extra, so that, to me, that the risk versus all the time to investigate this. So this is a school photo, and I think this company is Life something. They took photos in the U.S. too. They're quite and they bought a bunch of smaller school photo companies. And I got a hold of them with regard to that client and said, I've got all these school photos from all of our kids. Can I make a digital backup? And theirs was basically if they delete all their stuff after a few years, and if you're outside of that, you can make a copy again, but you can't sell it. You can't be selling them or doing other things with them, but you can make copies of them. So they also told me they would give me individual copyright releases if that the parent would have to phone. And I said, well, I am the agent. They said, no, the parent will have to phone and tell us the kid's name and we'll give them permission. I'm like, well, my client ain't phoning you, let me tell you. because that's not the things, that's why she hired me. So I actually talked to her. So I already talked to these people. I got her assistant to call and pretend she was her. But it's like, what is the, what's the risk? Like, we weren't trying to publish, these weren't going to be put in a all over bus boards or anything. We weren't doing anything with them. But there is extra work. That was the school photos. Another question that comes up sometimes is, well, what if I'm not getting paid for my blog? What if I'm not getting paid for the slideshow I create? Yeah, doesn't matter. Whether you're paid or not has no impact on um, copyright. So consider the risk, what you're doing with it. Do your due diligence if it is. I think like due diligence with more recent things, copyright photos, than the ones that are really old. And if you and document what process you used to research it. Not going to get you out of if somebody decides you violated copyright, but again, it may help in you saying, well, look, I tried all these things, I couldn't find you. Like, I just digitized all my wedding photos, and the professional photographer, they don't exist anymore. They're not, they were a photographer in Jasper, Alberta. They're not there anymore. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna digitize my wedding photos. I'm going to make an album, and then that's it. So, and then I'm actually going to throw. And I figure I have 3 copies of all the wedding photos that I had to buy. I have 3 copies of all the prints because I had one for me, one for my mother, and one for my mother-in-law. And guess who's got them all back again? Me. So I'm like, I'm digitizing these because I paid for 3 whole sets of photos. So I think I'm okay. Um, another question there becomes, a friend of mine who had a good camera took all the professional did professional shots on the in the church shots. My friend took all the shots at the reception, gave me the negatives, which I can't seem to lay my hands on anymore. So he wasn't a professional photographer; he was a hobby photographer. Who owns the copyright? Him. Even though he gave me the negatives and the photos, it's still his copyright. Now, what's the risk? Is my best friend from that time going to come back and say you illegally copied my photos? Most likely not. But part of the whole thing with due diligence. So, any questions about copyright that probably I can't answer, but we'll give it a shot.
I have
Oh,
one.
you're on mute, Barbara.
Oops.
I'm going to stop share for a minute.
There you go. I have 2 places to mute. In that last example, you said there were 2 people taking pictures at your wedding, the professional photographer and a friend with a good camera.
Yeah.
And then I think I don't know if I missed something, but then you said who owns the copyright on, I assume, the photos the friend took.
Yes, that's what I meant.
The
Yeah.
friend owns the copyright, even though they gave you the photos and the negatives. If they didn't give you an explicit, and now I grant you in written form the copyright, they still own them. So
Yeah.
you couldn't turn around and make moolah from it. But by the same theory, what about presenting them here?
Well, no, exactly. And I'm, the thing about risk, I'm taking a risk because I have put on this public forum, and there is a
Right.
section in the US, and like I say, I never checked all the rest, that for educational purposes, you're exempt.
Right.
I think
Fair
Deborah
use.
dealt with that because it's kind of vague too. It's not
Yeah.
clear. And a lot of people define when they say, oh, well, it's education. Um, it depends. It's not a clear area
There's
either. So,
I'm going to include in the notes a whole discussion from EFF.org, which is essentially a digital organization here in California, but they work worldwide, and they have a whole section on the topic of fair use.
mhm.
And I'll include that there. I can't represent what it says and where you should go, but at the end of the day, it's sort of a variation on the "don't let the perfect be the enemy of the
Enemy of the
good."
good, yeah. And
Right.
actually, Marcy, that's a really good question because Sears doesn't exist anymore. And so I was one of the seminars I watched to prepare me for this actually mentioned that Sears somewhere at somebody issued a blanket um, permission for you to copy their photos. So go ahead and copy your kids' photos. we are in more, apparently, like I had a lot of mine done at Walmart. And apparently that's a little bit more less clear because Walmart had contractors in all the time, even though it was Walmart studio. They had different contractors and different people owned their studios. So again, I go to the risk. Like,
Mm.
and also I look at the fact that I paid them for, the packages of photos and I have like 25, 30 photos in various sizes. And I'm figuring like, I think I'm covered to copy one of them. And is Walmart going to send somebody out to look through my computer? Because I'm not going to publish them. I'm not going to publish them. And that's what I said. There generally seems to be an accepted um, in this day and age that that an individual can make a copy of something for their own personal use as an archive copy. Because a lot of the copyright laws were written before we even knew the whole digital thing was going to happen. Like you were talking about physically printed photos. And if I had a photo, I could put it in my photo album. And so
And
the logic, which I know that's logic is not a legal thing either, would dictate that if you bought something that you can make a backup copy of it now digitally. And that seems to be the
there was a
common
big fight
interpretation.
about there was a big fight about that on the subject of time shifting. If I use a VCR to record a program on television, is that fair use? And that was specifically declared fair use. That's just time shifting. I was a consumer of the same content. I'm now
Yes.
consuming it at a different time.
I've been warned if you're using photos that came from Getty Images, be very careful. They're very protective of their images. And Disney, because I had that same client had where you're on the roller coaster and everybody puts their hands up and they snap a photo of you. Well, in the old days before you could just buy them on a disc, you bought a print and you paid a lot of money for them too. Like I know when I went to Disneyland, we'd go and go like, yeah, is that worth $25 US? I don't know, but I had a bunch of these photos, and so like I said, I did a lot of due diligence on this project. Disney, I sent them, I think, an email first, and I got back that I had to write to their legal department. And I couldn't find the letter because it must have turned into writing. It wouldn't do it by email. And I was just looking at my emails and I didn't bother to dig that folder out to look for the actual one. But I had to tell them the date of the photo, the name of the family members in the photo, and where it was taken. And they would grant me permission to make one copy of that specific one. They were very protective, and it was lawyers that wrote back to me. It wasn't like the customer service or anything. Princess Cruises, I sent them a note because everybody get your cruise pictures taken. They said, well, thank you for asking. We have no problem. We take those pictures for the enjoyment of our clientele. So whatever they would like to do with them themselves, we don't care. Not, I've now given nobody, they didn't say, oh yeah, we'll give you our copyright. They just said whatever their individual who in the photo wants to do. So
Kathy,
yes,
did you look into if I put a photo on my blog and I put a caption to say this photo is from the State Library or something like that, is that covering you?
I it's that Deborah addressed that too. I think it is. Like I'm thinking that putting in stuff with credit, if you credit the copyright holder,
Yeah,
and again, it's probably a question too is, are you making money? There's a
yeah,
difference between showing a photo in your blog that came from a library, and probably the place to check is the library and their
yeah,
rights. But it's
yeah,
different than if you take a photo and you make 100 prints of it and sell them.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So it
yeah,
goes back to that risk and what you're doing with them,
yeah.
where I think, um, you know, how would what might I be doing that would come to the attention? And you get in the thing I'd be really more careful in, and this happens way more often that somebody does do this, is music. Using
Ah,
music, video slideshows and things.
yeah,
And how we do them, memorial slideshows. As a photo manager, I had to tell clients who did not enjoy hearing this that just because I bought the song on iTunes or doesn't mean I own it. I don't own the copyright. I can, it's my right to play it, not to put it in. slideshows and everything else. And generally, um, people I've seen, I'm trying to remember, maybe it was Pinterest. I got a couple notices one time that I had an illegally used image somewhere. So if it was on Pinterest, it would have been something that I pinned from somebody else that somebody else had
Mhm.
shared. But people have been, you put that family, you take the family memorial slideshow that you made privately and you play it at the service. Then it will just, oh, can you send a link to it? I want to keep it. And then they go, oh, look at this beautiful slideshow montage. And you post it on YouTube and say, hey, look at this was my mother's slideshow, and isn't it beautiful? And then somebody comes along and goes, yeah, you used our music in it and it's covered by copyright and you don't have the right to use it. And that's true. So,
Mm. Yeah, yeah,
so music, like you start, as you see, the gray gets,
yeah,
it's not too
yeah,
gray archiving for our own use. The more you do different things, the grayer it gets.
yeah, yeah,
And so as photo managers, basically our advice to each other and to new managers was do not use public copyrighted music. You must use public domain music or um, period. Public domain. You can't use, if like I know you love that song by Sting, but you can't put it in anything.
yeah,
And we couldn't put it in if I did, um, if I made a slideshow for you, Jennifer. Um, I can't put that music in it, even if you're going to, because I charge you money for the slideshow. I can't put that music in it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that's where the areas get grayer. Like if I make a book for a client, um, then if I've scanned copyrighted photos, this is no longer a digital backup. It has now become a new product, and I've charged money for it by using somebody else's copyrighted photo.
yeah,
It isn't
yeah,
owned by the client either. So very gray.
yeah.
Let's talk about something much easier on the head for a few minutes here. Okay, I've got to go back to share screen. Not that one. To share. Okay, we got Richard back. Okay, we're going to move on to the next one. So there was a question I put out. I asked what people were interested in here in talking about in Kathy's corner for the rest of the year, and or for more questions people had. And one of the comments was Lisa McGuire said, "I have an elderly relative." I read the question wrong, but I'm going to answer it anyway. I have an elderly relative who's sitting on a treasure trove of very old family photos, but I can't get her to focus on sorting them or, more importantly, identifying them. I think she doesn't like to admit she doesn't know some of these people, which may be part of the problem. Any suggestions for how to engage her? I visited her one afternoon a while back on the pretext of asking if I could scan some of them, and that was semi-helpful to get her to look at some pictures and talk about them, but it's an uphill battle. I don't want to be a pest or maybe bring up a memory she may not want to remember or make her feel uncomfortable in any way. Any tips would be welcome, especially on what to do if I never get her to do this with me. And then Marcy commented on there too that you have some pictures that you don't, there's nobody to ask about too, which is another problem. We might go further into that one in another sessions. Kayla Bayang, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correct. She offered a suggestion to Lisa. She said, find one to two, three people that you've identified that you think she might have more of. Ask her if she could help you look through her photos and find more of just those people. The size of the task to identify all those photos is so overwhelming, like that's our mount inertia. Start small and very slow, and then bring food and let her set the pace. And reassure her you're doing this because you love the family and the memories. And I liked her last comment said, and that you're not in a rush, even though you are. And I think that's it. Let them set the pace. And this is if you're trying to get stories now. Um, tell them why you're doing it. Be comfortable. Cup of tea, some snacks, which you don't really want to eat while you're handling photos, but you don't touch them, just, but maybe cookies for the person to help. Um, Ask some easy questions first. What was grandma's house like? Listen, this was an important one that I found somewhere else too, is, and actually this came out of my many years of dealing with my mom who had Alzheimer's and dementia, was listen without correcting. Because the quickest way to shut somebody down telling you a story is to tell them that you remember it differently or that they're wrong. So let go of let go of that. You can always verify the story later. Lots of stuff on Substack about verifying the stories you were told, which is really good, and validate their memories. Like, this was really a good, that was a good story. I really, thanks for sharing it. And it's slow. And so the other thing I had was, because I thought she meant she couldn't get the photos out of her. Like, they wouldn't give the photos away, which is something else because a lot of people guard those heritage photos. I'm lucky because I've got the photos from my mom, which had a pile of the stuff that came from my grandparents from the farm. I scanned for my aunt's albums that she'd made, and he didn't want the photos back. So guess who's got them in a box here? I have some others from my twin aunts that my cousin gave me when we were doing scanning for a memorial show at one point. And I have my other aunt who's in this picture here, who I have all of her pictures that I have to keep, and I'll tell you why. And this is part of it. Meet them where they're at. Like, if they're reluctant to give them away, you need to talk to them, find out, what are they worried about? Most of us, they're not going to get them back. And that's a big deal. And so maybe you just need to take a few at a time, not the entire collection. Explain what you're doing. Make sure they know that you're trying to preserve the family history and that you want to make sure that that for future generations, they'll be able um, to find out what happened. I have my cousin's son. I'm not a genealogist, so I have trouble with those second, third cousin things. So my cousin's son, I had posted a picture, an old one from quite a while ago, and he commented on, he goes, "Oh, thanks for sharing this." He said, he says, "I don't have hardly any photos of when me and my brother were younger because they were all lost in the house fire when my mom's house burned down." So my cousin and their mom were divorced, and she had a house fire, and mom had all the photos. So, and he said, "This is great." And these are pictures where he happened to be somewhere. And so if you can explain, like, give them other reasons. If you're anywhere that's experienced a natural disaster, if you could say, I want to do this because we have to try and save these things, because and now the whole downsizing can also be a thing too. Reassure what you're doing. Okay, that's a very bad sentence. Reassure them what you're going to do with their pictures when you're finished. That's what I was trying to say there. Get them talking about the photos if there's still reluctance. Get them to talk about the story behind a photo, and then talk about how, it would be, can I get a copy of that photo so that I can put the story with it? But trying to reassure them that, you aren't just going to take, because probably what's happened in a lot of families is people don't know where the pictures went. And I've had that happen to a degree sometime in my own family. And I put scan where they are. So I have one of my surviving aunt on my dad's side doesn't live where I do. She lives, I have to fly to go there, drive for several hours, and so it's not convenient to take my scanners. I don't want to take the 87 albums she's made. I don't want to even ask her if I could take them with me, because my fear would be that I will end up with 87 albums that I don't know what to do with. But when I'm there, I scan with my phone now, because what's our old saying? Done is better than perfect. Is it ideal to scan with a phone? Maybe not. Don't take a picture. Get a scanning app for your phone, and there's a bunch of them. But when I'm there, I just sit there and talk and visit, and I take scans of the pictures on my phone. Are they terrific? No. Are they better than nothing? Without a doubt, they're better than nothing. So the picture on here, this is, I'll tell you one last story, and then I think we're out of time. But you could also share some tips if you have any. So So some of the different ideas that you might, get somebody talking about a particular picture, something that, the picture hanging in the wall of the wedding. If you, boy, Grandpa sure looked handsome on his wedding day. What was that? And I remember at one point, my mother, because my grandfather was at Vimy Ridge, um, in World War I, I guess he was at Vimy Ridge. And so she was reading a book. So she said, Dad, I was reading a book about Vimy Ridge. And she says, you were there. And he didn't like to talk. And now, after listening to Jennifer Holick, I got a whole new perspective on why he probably didn't want to talk about these things. But he said, and she goes, what was that like? I was reading about what the Canadians were there. And he goes, bloody Canadians. They were all up on the ridge shooting at us. Call that friendly fire. And that was about all she pried out of him. So it's, sometimes you take what you got and then I'll have to try and verify that story to see if it's true or not. But so this is a picture of my dear Aunt Jean, who passed away several years ago. And she lived in a mobile home in Kelowna, and she had no children. My cousin and I were her power of attorney and kind of her guardians and helped look after her. And my uncle had passed. And so she was having trouble managing. She fell and broke a hip, just the usual stories. She was having trouble managing on her own in her mobile home. And so we convinced her to move her to a senior's residence, not a nursing home. She didn't need a nursing home, but it was a wonderful place. I mentioned I would like to move here right now because she could have she had a kitchen, she could still cook, make herself little meals. She had her bedroom, but you could go for meals if you wanted. If you were sick, they brought the meals to your room. They had a swimming pool, they had activities, they had a coffee room. And so this meant that we had to move her out of her trailer. And so the trailer was full of photos in frames, in drawers, and everything else. And so she was like, and so I wanted to, I said, well, I'll scan the photos. Well, I don't know. I don't know about that. I want to hang them. And she was moving into what do you call them, a studio. So out of a two bedroom. So there wasn't really enough room for all the little metal frames, pictures everywhere, like, the little tiny square frame. Yeah, there were loads of those everywhere. And so I said, Auntie, there won't be enough space for all those pictures. Like, let's pick a couple that we can put on the wall, like your wedding picture with Uncle Pete and, some of these, your favorites. But I said, we can't really, you've got nowhere to put all these other frame pictures. So finally, I convinced her that I'm a photo manager. This is what I do for a living. I convinced her to let me bring all of her photos home with the promise that I wouldn't get rid of them. So they're right behind me in a box, sitting there, because I made a commitment to her that I would never get rid of them. It's marked on the box. They're all scanned. And so maybe my kids will get rid of them, but it wasn't them that made the commitment. So I will respect my commitment. But so what I did she's in her place now, and the black thing there is a cat beside her to her right. It's a black cat named Sweetheart. So she got to take her cat. So she's in a recliner where her and Sweetheart love to sit all the time, and she's looking at a digital frame with all her photos on it that I took to her and said, and I just put them all on there. I didn't Done is better than perfect. I didn't worry about making them all nice and organized. And she sat there for hours and she'd look at the picture and she'd say, everybody, she could like tell me everything in the pictures and everything and tell me the stories. And it was little, but it was just like looking at a picture. Didn't try to put them on her TV, didn't try any of that. And so at one point, I'm sitting on the bed because there's no other place to sit. And I'm watching her look at all these pictures and I'm thinking, I'm really not a part of this process anymore. I'm just sort of sitting, hanging out. I could maybe go, but I'd snap that picture of her I feel good every time I look at it because she looked at that frame all the time. Everybody who came to visit, she showed them all the pictures. And there were a lot of pictures on that frame that were in her drawer, not just the ones off the walls. And so she got to see on a regular basis all the pictures from her life and loved it. So I think that's all I got, Barbara. Is that a good place to stop?
to catch me all sniffly. That was
Sniff-
beautiful. That was really, really beautiful. Aunt Gladys, right? That is
and
a
Jean.
Aunt Jean.
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 Yeah.
Just precious, incredibly precious, especially
Well, it's
as you
power of
tell
photos.
the story behind it. I mean, the story of the photos is just precious.
It is.
And what a classic point. Come to them and don't take it away. Understand what matters to them. Basically, get in their shoes and
Yeah.
empathize.
And when you think about it, sometimes like the pictures she has of my uncle were the only thing she had left of him, were her memories and her photos. So yeah, maybe she didn't want me to haul them all the way back to Calgary. She did eventually because I promised her I'd look after it. But maybe that, that's some of the reluctance is these are what I have, and what if I don't? And a lot of times, and I don't think she really understood the whole concept that she was going to get them on that little frame back either. And I think at the time I said I'd make her a book or something too.
Marvelous in so many ways because, again, here you are reusing the photos. Let's be clear, just to circle back to the top of all of this. And
Yes.
also, I've seen this, as many of you know, I lost my mom with dementia and cared for her in a care home very near me, where I got to know many of the other residents over 8 years. And many of you I know have family, loved ones who have been through this. And it's surprising. They're not going to tell you everything. For my mom, it to realize she had macular degeneration and she really couldn't see much further than the edge of her hand. And then she had the dementia, which made it difficult for her to articulate what the problem was. And yet we stand there waiting for her to, that's Bobby. You just met Bobby. Don't you remember Bobby? And that's the worst thing you can do, which, by the way, just to plug in for another program, we had a Jew Rhodes who gave a talk a year and a half ago, I guess, about her work with people with dementia in particular, and
Mhm.
using photo books as a way not to jog their memory about their great grandchildren. They don't know who they are, but to take them back to a happy place of where they lived as when they were little. And,
And that they remember.
that they remember.
That they remember
Exactly.
without me saying, oh, and I know, yeah, as I went through the same experience, Barbara, including the macular degeneration. But I know that the worst thing you could do was walk in and say, I walked in and said, hi, Mom, it's Kathy. But to give context, because sometimes she knew who I was and sometimes she didn't. But if I just walked in and started talking, quite often she'd be very confused and not know and think I was one of the staff who she didn't really like
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I always gave her the context, and then if she called me something else, I just went with the flow. But you could get her always. My grandfather had dementia too, and I remember one point, and he was in a nursing home, and he hadn't been very verbal because he's the one who hardly spoke beforehand. Um, and I was sitting there one day, and again, it says, "Grandpa, it's Kathy," and he looks at me and goes, "Do you still have that little black dog?" And I did still have that little black dog, and he had met my little black dog, and it was just like, oh my gosh, he's in there. He's still there. So
Yeah.
it's the value of photos. So the next time I went, I took him a picture of the little black dog. So photos can
The
be
val-
just
it's the
so wonderful.
value of pictures that these pictures are like little winged platforms that carry these stories, and it's actually the stories that matter.
Mhm.
And however it is you get there,
Yes.
because those stories really can carry generation to generation. So, do we all sing Kumbaya and have a big hug? I want to thank everyone and all of you watching at home, so to speak. Um, we're all at home. Um, thank you all for your attention through this wonderful program. Again, as always, Kathy, taking on a difficult subject, as where your you know laws will vary to your local jurisdiction. And as with everything, what is the penalty? What is the price? What is the, worst thing that can happen is what they say, take it off of YouTube. Yeah, okay. I'll go find some other music. But if you're using that core image as your logo, well, maybe you're in trouble, and that's a bad idea. So across the board, really being cognizant of property, even in a digital form, and all of the ways it can take. And I want to thank you so much, and thank you all. And we will have our continuing series next month. If anybody happens to have an answer to that Sears question, which was a very good one, thank you so much, Bill. I will pop it into the notes. I have another hour or so before I get all this done, so it can even be afterwards or in the notes if you all watching at home see that, because I think it's a really good question, both about Walmart and Sears, any of those major networks that, Reese shared them, Facebook and famously Ancestry, have always required you to sign away essentially a license for any photos that you share on their platforms, because you delete your account, your photos are still flying around. That's why they have to do that. But,
I think what's very interesting is often you see on Facebook someone posts, I don't give Facebook any rights to use my pictures for any purpose. And it's like, yes, you did.
yes,
Did you?
you did. You're
where
here.
we have to
You
read
did.
those nasty,
You
boring,
did.
long terms and conditions.
Or
The
just
minute you
understand that
started using
you're
it,
giving
you
it all
gave
up.
them everything.
Yeah. No, they have the control. You can go ahead and sue them if you'd like.
Yeah. There you go.
In line, buddy.
Yeah.
All righty. Thank you so much again. We'll talk
Thank
again
you.
soon. See you next time.
Thanks, Barb.